With voter apathy likely in Saturday's governorship election in Anambra State, a situation occasioned by the palpable insecurity in the state and accentuated by the fear of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, victory amongst the three big contenders, the All Progressive Grand Alliance, the People's Democratic Party, and the All Progressive Congress, APC, might be dependent on the fallout of the recent governorship debate organized by Rise News Channel. The difference between victory and defeat will ultimately come down to who amongst the three forerunners is better able to mobilize his party's support to go out and vote, even as the threat from IPOB looms over the elections. What this means is that the performance of each of the candidates in the three major parties, Chukwuma Soludo of APGA, Andy Uba of APC, and Valentine Uzigbo of the PDP at the debate might likely ride on the backs of their ability to mobilize their campaign organizations in spite of the fear of IPOB in the state. Voter apathy has been a big concern. How well can they mobilize?
So that's the big question here, and another part of the huge, complex political puzzle. Apart from the competence and experience of candidates, as we saw in the debates, the character of the candidates also matters. And then also the ability of the parties to mobilize big turnouts. It was mentioned on the night, which I'm sure you recall, that Anambra State elections usually are characterized by low voter turnout. I have some stats here. 2017 election was 22% voter turnout, which is low. It was higher in the previous election in 2013, 32%, which isn't so great either. But there's a recent poll suggesting that 68% of India Anambra might sit this election out. And of that 68% who are sitting it out, most people, the number one reason they cite is obviously IPOB. So I'm not sure exactly how the political parties can mobilize their voters, because really it's up to them. The security agencies have done their bit. We've seen that armada that's been sent to INEC. INEC is ready to go, but it's really about getting the people out to vote and making them feel assured that they're safe to do so.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, well, I don't know whether I can make definitive statements, having been a co-moderator of that Anambra gubernatorial or governorship debate 2021, because, our disposition is one of complete impartiality in the matter, complete neutrality. But, well, when I sat down out there, I was a moderator. Now I'm sitting down here as a pundit. And these are some of my observations. Yes, voter apathy will be a major issue in this particular election in Anambra. And the reasons are fairly obvious enough. A group called YIAGA Africa, a civil society organization, has consistently done reports tracking the situation in Anambra State. And one of the issues that our group has focused upon is voter turnout. And in the fourth report on this election, released by that YIAGA Africa, they made a point that, look, many people will be reluctant to come out, and indeed voter turnout would be a major issue. There may have been cases of voter turnout or voter apathy in the past, but this one is a very peculiar one. It's happening at a time when you have the Indigenous Peoples Organization of Biafra being involved in a lot of activities in Abia State, raising questions about the continued trial of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. And of course, some people pointed out when we were in Anambra that ironically, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is not from Anambra State. He's from Abia. But, some groups in Anambra, they've taken up the matter because if anything were to happen, if there is any disruption, Anambra State being more or less the commercial capital of the entire Southeast, has a major stake in the matter. So would people come out to vote? Now, what are the variables involved? One variable will be the effort made by the security agencies to assure the people. INEC, the state government, the Nigerian police, the military, the national security advisor, the president himself had said, look, we will not allow non-state actors to overwhelm the Nigerian state. And one effort to demonstrate that is the election that will take place in Anambra on November 6th. As we left Awka yesterday, we saw heavy deployment I mean, I'm not reporting what is in the papers. I saw this with my own eyes, We saw heavy development of vehicles and personnel, military personnel, police personnel, all the way from Oka to the Onitsha Bridge before we crossed into Asaba, arriving. So, which means that when the president said, look, we will make this happen, he wasn't making an idle statement. And when the Police Inspector General of Police and the National Security Advisor, acting on the instructions of the president, said, look, anybody that tries to sabotage this election, we will meet that person force for force. Okay, so it's like some non-state actors are trying to test the will of the state, and the state appears prepared to also face them. Before we saw that massive deployment on the streets of Oka, there were checkpoints everywhere. So the only problem we may have with that is that this is likely to be a heavily militarized election with police presence, with all those concentric circles that they are going to deploy in the over 5,700 polling booths in Anambra State, in 21 local governments, and with 18 candidates in the matter. So what will happen? Will the people have confidence in the ability of the state to protect them and then come out? Would the groups, the non-state actors say, okay, we will confront the state. So by Saturday, we will see what will happen. However, the police says, the police IG says they've been doing jingles. Can you imagine in an election, even the police mobilizing, doing part of the work of INEC to say, look, we are ready, broadcasting on radio and urging the people to come out. Now, the candidates themselves, will also, it will be in their interest for there to be some level of voter turnout. What is the thing about voter turnout? It's about legitimacy. There is a certain threshold in an election that you must cross. If you don't cross it, even if you have the majority figures, there may be issues of legitimacy in terms of representation and the credibility of the process itself. Another factor here is that there are undecided and undisclosed voters from some of the reports, surveys that I have seen. And those undecided and undisclosed voters who may decide to change their mind on that day, may be the ones that will swing the votes either for or against any of the parties that are identified as the leading political parties. Now, in one report that I read, and from the profile of our conversation in Oka, you look at it, the three candidates, they are all from Anambra South. In fact, they are all from the same local government, Aguata local government area of Anambra State. So Aguata local government area is going to be a major factor. But Anambra South holds about 31% of the 2.4 million registered eligible voters. So which means that whoever is going to win will also have to work not just in Anambra South or Aguata local government, but also do a lot of work in Anambra Central and also Anambra North. Since there is a consensus, that the choice should go to Anambra South. However, you may have a dark horse springing a surprise, among the other candidates. So I think it is difficult at this moment to predict and say this is how the election will go in terms of turnout. If there is better turnout, from other places, the calculus may change. So fingers crossed, but we urge the security agencies to do their bit. There's an interagency security council, election security council. When it is over, we will be here to assess, the effort and how that relates to the turnout of the 2.4 million eligible registered voters.
Interesting times in India, Anambra. Thank you both for your analysis of this issue. We'll take that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Aaron Akerediola to give us updates on global business and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Moving on to Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. basically everybody looking towards the results of the FOMC meeting and whether there's going to be any clues about tapering and the way in which the Fed is approaching the future of the US economy. So shares basically mixed. The one that actually contrasts though this is in South Korea, the Kospi. Although it declined 1.33%, there is a new online pay thing called Kakao Pay. It's backed by China's Ant Group, and it more than doubled in its launch there, and that's quite good news for those who like online payment. But it's even better news for South Korea, which was worried whether or not the appetite for IPOs was still continuing. It clearly is. Elsewhere, mainland Chinese stocks declined slightly. Shanghai Composite down. S&P ASX 200 in Australia, though, up very, very slightly indeed. So again, as I said, a very mixed picture as far as that's concerned. As far as China's economy is concerned, the coal shortage appears to be easing after Beijing, after the government's actually stepped in. It's allowed more imports of coal, not from Australia, of course, presumably from Russia. I don't know yet, but I'll find out for tomorrow. Number of Chinese provinces with significant power shortages has now fallen to 2, or less it did in mid-October, according to official figures there. At one stage, it was 18, if you remember. Chinese authorities have allowed that, but they've also cut flights now. China's on high alert. Beijing's on high alert, certainly, for a spike in COVID cases. The 2 airports between half the flights to and from Beijing City's 2 airports were cancelled. As you know, China has a zero tolerance policy towards COVID, and I think this is an indication of that actually taking place. The founder of TikTok, the TikTok owner, ByteDance, he's called Xing Jinping. We knew that he was going to step down. He's actually now stepped down. ByteDance is restructuring as well. The video gaming thing, which the Chinese love, which is their version of Fortnite, which is called Fortress Night, is closing down on November the 15th, part of a continuing crackdown on tech companies from the Chinese government, and stringent controls came in earlier this year, even more so. As far as the US is concerned, yes, of course, everything really waiting for what the Fed says. The Dow Jones, the S&P, and also the NASDAQ, all 3 of them, once again into record territory. This cannot last, and many more. You're going to see many more naysayers now coming out of the woodwork saying that actually the market's due for a correction, not a crash, but just a correction because things are actually too high. Really fine balance for the Fed, quite clearly. It doesn't want to talk up the tapering too much because investors will get scared. It doesn't want to talk it down because if they put the soft pedal on too much, it'll increase fears of inflation. So again, it's down to, this is where the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, makes his money basically by actually talking about an ex-Bank of England governor, Mark Carney. His net zero coalition is now up to $130 trillion. What is it going to do? Well, it's called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Not a very catchy name, but you can see why it's called the Glasgow thing because of COP26. More of that in a second. The target is to hit a large amount of companies should hit net zero by 2050. 450 banks are backing this across 45 countries. Its critics say it's a mile wide and an inch deep, but there we are. It's a start in any case. And I do feel, as I've often said before, that any pushes towards net zero are not going to come from conferences. They come from businesses which are sparked by conferences, and that's what's happening here. While leaders have agreed to cut emissions, that was the big thing yesterday, methane emissions by 30%. That deforestation deal, which was the biggest one so far, which I told you about yesterday, has come under criticism because apparently there's nothing to enforce it. Who knows? Maybe that'll change. The Gulf states, staying with COP26, have said that we can't just switch the taps off, but they're heading for net zero. Saudi by 2060, United Arab Emirates by 2050. And still on COP26, UK firms are going to be forced to plan for a low carbon future. They'll hit climate targets which will be set by the Treasury, so they won't get Treasury help if they don't adhere to those targets. Again, there's nothing illegal or legal about this. It's down to naming and shaming, which tends to work just as well in this country. 4 more energy companies in the UK have collapsed. Now there are 2 million people looking for new energy companies. They won't be without energy, there will be supplied, but the big energy companies are saying now we are getting to a stage where we cannot absorb all these people who've been let down by their smaller companies, and they want government help. So far, the government has turned a deaf ear to their requests. Oil faces a challenge this week. We've got OPEC Plus, of course, and gold retreats on a rising US dollar. That is your global view this morning.
Right, Michael, this talk about net zero. I mean, what's your take on it amidst the fact that the world has an energy crisis going on and everybody's saying we'll have to change the energy source in the next 20, 40 years? Isn't it hypocrisy, just like what happened in Kyoto in 97? Two, the Fed has started tapering. Yesterday, Janet Yellen says inflation was due to COVID. Some people are saying other things. What is happening? Wouldn't the tapering of the Fed now put the pressure more on the economy out of America?
Yes. So net zero, first of all. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult indeed. And it's what, a lot of governments are actually underlining this and saying this is what they're going to do. Brought you reports about Carney's fund, which is going to try to help the transitional stage of companies towards that. It's going to be very, very difficult indeed. No question about it. I don't know about hypocrisy. I'd much prefer to talk about impossibility, quite honestly. Although, from the hypocrisy point of view, you might say that China is being very honest by not attending the conference, just sending a written message wishing it well, knowing very, very well that their development will depend upon fossil fuels. And I was at an energy analyst meeting yesterday, talking about this very subject, and every one of the energy analysts there said that fossil fuels are not going to disappear overnight. They're still going to be there for a considerable amount of time. The transitioning is going to be very expensive. Not that it isn't necessary, but it will be very expensive, and nobody has actually bottomed out the cost of it. As far as the Fed's concerned, I don't really know what Janet Yellen's saying, to be honest. I mean, all I know is that they probably will begin their tapering. Inflation is rising simply because there's massive demand and stocks are relatively low. It's supply chain and the rest of it. I don't know whether that's caused by COVID. I think it's caused by the exit from COVID and how economies all the way around the world, including those in China, are reacting far more quickly than people had actually thought. And the bottom line about all this is that energy prices are going to rise, not because there isn't enough fuel around, not because there isn't enough gas around, not because there's not enough oil around. It's simply that the shifting of it, the supply of it, the moving of it is not up to pace with people's demands right now, because we're coming out of this pandemic much more quickly than people thought we would.
Well, quickly, Michael, I may have been out of town for about 2 days, but I wanted to talk about Elon Musk, who has said that Tesla, has not entered into any deal with Hess. We were told that when Hess ordered about 100,000 electric vehicles and gave a commitment in that regard, you recall that that resulted in the share price of Tesla going up by about 12.6%. But now we have Elon Musk out there saying that, look, Hess deal does not exist, and that even if Hess makes any order, it will be at competitive price, and that the economics of Tesla is not affected by whatever Hess does. Why is he doing that? Is it because he needs to show that Hess needs Tesla? Tesla does not need Hess. Is this some kind of power game, some kind of confidence show? And then still talking about these big billionaires, super billionaires. Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, at the Alliance for Deforestation on the sidelines of COP26, has pledged an earth fund of about 1 billion, or is it $10 billion? A lot of money. Why is he doing that? Is it out of criticism because, Amazon has been criticized, even by his own workers, of not paying enough attention to the condition of the world? And you recall Prince Williams also complained when, that space race started. And he made a statement that, look, people should be more interested on the problems of Earth, of this planet, rather than going up and down, trying to explore another territory in space. And are you optimistic, like Boris Johnson, that the deal on methane emissions would happen and that much progress will be made, because we often see this division between commitments, promises, and actual an action after the conference. It's easy to go to the conference floor and just say all the right things.
Okay, on methane, the second most polluting greenhouse gas, we know that the 30% reduction, I have no idea how they will actually do that. Once again, you put your finger on it. You see, the problem is the developing economies are saying all along these words are absolutely fine, but we are not at that stage yet. India, did it not say a couple of days ago, yeah, fine, we'll do that. We'll get rid of coal by 2070. That's 20 years on from the 2050 that other people have agreed in 2030. They throw these dates around. I think what it's called in the trade is greenwashing. And what it means is that people like Jeff Bezos, for example, will latch onto these issues. They will try to deflect what's happening to his own company, which in many people's minds has got too big and isn't taxed enough and is spreading its tentacles across the whole of the world. And he's joining in with the green side of things. If I were turning to Elon Musk, if I were the authorities in the United States, I'd take a pretty dim view of the founder of a company saying one thing and then saying another thing and saying, actually, he's not specified whether indeed there was an agreement in principle with Hertz. All he's saying is that nothing's been signed. Now, how is that not going to affect the share price? And you know, why are the financial authorities in the United States not bearing down on this? He did the same with cryptocurrencies. He just needs to send a tweet. Moves in the financial markets. Now that simply is not healthy. I'm no rule maker. I don't know what the complexities are, but if I were the authorities in the United States, I'd be looking very closely at this, and he would be feeling a big baseball bat in very tender regions.
Wow. On that note, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now, as we continue to monitor the progress made in getting more people to safety at the site of the Ikoyi building collapse, Arise News correspondent Adefemi Akinsoya joins us to give us an update on the situation in Ikoyi. Morning, Adefemi.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me, Tundum.
Loud and clear. Do go ahead, Adefemi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are here. This is, of course, on the third day of the search and rescue operation. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder. Not much is happening just now. And there does seem to be some form of a return to normalcy. Both lanes have been reopened for traffic to be passing through them. But members of the military are still present. They're the ones who've pushed us even further back to the other side of this road. And they've told us that once work does commence, they will block the roads again and we will be allowed to go back and return to our original positions. In terms of an update in the death toll numbers, 2 more people were recovered today, 2 more bodies unfortunately dead. That brings the death toll to 22 people and the amount of survivors to 9 people. Overnight, around 1:30 a.m., it's believed the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, did make his way to the site and joined in finding out what the latest numbers were. It's unclear if anyone was on earth while he was on ground, but in a public statement he released via his Instagram page, he did say that he's taking the matter very seriously, that being the investigation, and should there be any need for any reprimand or should any person or entity be found responsible, they should be prepared to face the full wrath of the law.
Well, Adefemi, there have been reports about protests by family members whose relatives were at that site, and they're saying that the government is not moving fast enough to try to rescue people or to take charge of the situation. But the government has since suspended the executive director of the responsible agency, that's the Lagos State Building Control Agency. What's the situation? Do we have any information in terms of how the state government is engaging family members who are concerned? They even say they are not allowed to identify the persons, the bodies that have been retrieved, for them to know, whether their persons still have a chance or not.
That is the crux of the family members' frustration. The fact that they are hearing that bodies are being pulled from the rubble, that there are 9 survivors, but they don't know who they are, and they haven't been able to make any type of identification process. When you speak to the emergency responders, their first priority now is to get as many survivors and as many bodies out of the rubble as soon as possible. And while you can understand that, that doesn't soothe any of the tensions of the people outside who want to find out if their loved ones are here. There are family members who have been here since the outset on Monday, looking for updates when bodies are being brought out. Unless you were here almost immediately after the building came down on Monday afternoon, where you may have been able to see or identify the first bodies being removed from the rubble, no one has been able to make a positive identification as to whether or not their family members are among the dead who have been recovered, among the survivors who were pulled, or among the people still trapped inside. And indeed, yesterday there were clashes between local people and the military here because they felt as though they had been pushed aside and weren't being addressed directly. In terms of the family members too, you'll remember that on Monday, the people, before the full brunt of the emergency services arrived here, it was in fact local laborers who were the first pulling people from the rubble, and those people were still there yesterday arguing and asking to be let in through the gate so that they can join the rescue effort because, in their opinion, the progress was moving too slowly. Indeed, Bola Oki had been suspended by the Lagos State Governor, and that comes after the Deputy Lagos State Governor confirmed that the building that was down did have approval to be 21 stories high. You'll know that there was some form of confusion between whether or not the building was only supposed to be 9 stories, 15 stories. We saw letters from engineers washing their hands of certain parts of the project, but the Lagos State Deputy Governor did in fact say the building that came down was allowed to be 21 stories high, but that hasn't really answered questions as to what caused it to come down and how soon people can start identifying survivors, dead bodies, and start putting names to the faces that we know about.
All right, Femi, thank you so much for the great job. We have to move on now, but we'll still come back to you, in the coming hours for this unfolding story. Thank you so much.